All right, hey everybody. So I've had a lot of people ask me about collar fitment, harnessing, adjusting harness, line adjustment, hitching and all this kind of stuff, and I want to try to get some videos for y'all so y'all can understand and see what I do. Now this will vary with different types of harness. I'm sure it'll vary with different parts of the country. I'm going to show you how I do it and how I've been taught by older mule skinners. The first thing I'm going to show you is how I size for a collar. And basically just go to Lowe's or Home Depot, buy you two 24-inch framing squares. These are rusty, but they still serve the purpose. Take and put them together like this to where they make like a C. Maybe that'll make sense. First thing you want to do, you want them to where they'll close in and out like that. Open them up wide so that way, because it's got to slip on the mule's neck or horse, same thing. It works the same. Okay, this is Kate here. She's my lead mule. First thing you need to do, you need to find her shoulder. See how she's got a real pronounced shoulder right here? You need to make sure you locate that and get a feel for the direction that it goes up to her withers, which is right here. Okay, the next thing you want to do, and she don't know what this is, she's a little scared of it, so, and your mule or horse probably will be too the first time you do it. Make sure her head or neck is square with her body. That's important because it can give you a false reading. Take this and right there on the layer of her shoulder is where this thing needs to go. Put it right on her shoulder and then close it together. Kind of work it back and forth and then pull it in and out. You want to have just a good slip fit. It don't need to be snug, it don't need to be tight, or it don't need to be real loose. Just a good slip fit where to come on and off. But the key here, y'all, come right around here, Skylar, where you can see it right here. This shoulder angle, it has got to set back on that shoulder. That's crucial. And then down here, it just touches her neck, and right up here, it just touches her withers. Then you pull it off. Don't move it. Hold it together with your hands. And then get your handy dandy tape measure. Now, if I had two people to help me, or one person to help me, we would measure from right here to right here. Okay, but I don't. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure from right here all the way across. And then I'm gonna subtract the width of this right here. I know it's 1.5 inches. See right there? 1.5 inches. Now, see where we're at right here? We're at 23.5, roughly 23 3/4. So I'm gonna take off 1.5 inches, which will make that roughly 22 inches. Okay, so she wears a 22-inch collar. I personally like to run pads under my collars. Okay, it helps distribute the load. It helps from soaring. And in my opinion, they're better around, all the way around. Some people prefer not to run, they prefer not to use a pad, and that's okay. I mean, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. In that case, you know she wears a 22-inch collar. With just you need a little bit of hand room down in the bottom. So we measured like right here. We measured a 23 3/4, subtract 1.5 inches, which would be 22 1/4. I would say you need something just a little bigger than that, you know, because the idea of it is you want to be able to slip your hand flat. You want to hold your hand flat and slip it in the throat of that collar. You want to have that much space in between her neck and in between her throat and that collar. So if you're going to not run a pad, a 22 1/4 or 22 1/2, actually you'd have to go up a size to a 23. That's what you would run, would be a 23-inch collar. Now, if you're going to run a pad, you're going to have to get one collar size bigger. So for her, she would need a 24-inch collar to allow for that pad being underneath it. Okay, you still get the one hand of freedom in there. You still got that one hand in there, but you had to allow for that extra inch of that collar pad. I hope that makes sense. Now, y'all, getting these collars right on these mules and these horses is key. It's just like us. If you don't get your shoes right and you put shoes on your feet, they're going to hurt you. And if you have to work in them all day, you're going to be miserable. The same thing goes with these mules. I see a lot of collar scars right down here, right in this area right here. What that is from is either from too big of a collar and it sets down too low. Whoa, come here. It sets down too low on their shoulders and buries into their shoulder right here, and it rocks back and forth. Come here. Come here, Kate. It rocks back and forth on their shoulders and gets their shoulder sore right in here, and it makes a gall spot. That's from too long a collar. Another thing that can cause that, see right here how her neck, let me straighten her head up here. She don't have a whole lot of muscling right up here in this area. Her neck is fairly straight, and most mules are this way. There are different shapes of collars. Some horses and mules have a real feminine type neck that's straight up and down. Some mules and horses will have a real thick neck up here at the top, and then some of them will have kind of an average neck. And depending on what kind of neck they have is depending on what kind of collar they need, what shape of collar they need. You got a full face collar, which is more for that feminine type neck. It's more of a straight up and down type of shoulder, not a whole lot of muscling, like a standard bred buggy horse, Morgan, you know, something along them lines. Smaller mules, they're like that a lot. Then you got what you call a half Sweeney, which is pretty much average. That's about 90% of what you're going to see out there. That's for a mule or a horse that's got just a little bit of muscling right up here at the top. That collar will have a little bit more cutout at the top on the back side to allow that collar to seat back on their shoulder all the way. And then the last type of shape of collar is for like a stud horse or a really big thick neck gelding or a big thick neck mare. And yes, mares will have necks like that too. My Canadian mares that I bought and they had really thick necks, and they had to have full Sweeney collars. If you don't get the cutout shape right up here at the top of their neck, that collar won't set back up here. It'll ride up and you'll get a funky angle. It'll be too steep on their neck and you'll sore them right here. Not to mention the fact that you'll pinch them right in this area. And y'all, there's a nerve that runs right across here. It's a big long word and I can't remember it right off, but there's a nerve that goes and feeds this muscle right here. If you pinch that nerve with a collar that's too tight, if it's too tight up here and you pinch their neck, you're going to crush that nerve. And when you crush that nerve, that muscle right there is going to atrophy. It's going to sink in. That's a telltale sign of the wrong kind of collar. So you want to make sure you get not only the right size collar, top to bottom, but you also want to get the right shape of collar. That is crucial to keep your mule or horse comfortable and doing work. If your mule or horse is doing a lot of heavy work, well, like we log and they're pulling heavy draft a lot of times, when they really bow up in the collar, their neck's going to swell a little bit. You know, that neck's going to kind of compress just a little, and it's going to swell. So you might want to have just a little bit of extra. They also make what they call a no choke collar, which instead of being round on the bottom, it comes down and it comes across flat. A lot of horse pullers use no choke collars because no matter what your draft line is, or the way you're pulling either a high line center draft or low line, it doesn't matter. If that collar goes up against them with that flat bottom, it ain't going to choke them. That's why they call it a no choke collar. Because it doesn't matter, you know, if your traces is a little high or a little low, whatever, if it sucks the collar up on their neck, it's not going to cut their wind off. And y'all, if you cut a horse or a mule's wind off, they're going to quit pulling. I mean, that's just the way it is. They're not stupid. If you got a collar on that's ill-fitted, in other words, it ain't sitting down up here and it's pinching their shoulders right here or pinching their shoulder up here, if you've got an ill-fitted collar, that mule or horse ain't going to put out. Now, they might pull something light like a little small wagon. You may never notice a problem. If you're just playing with them, tinkering with them, you probably never notice it. But if you start pulling heavy draft, the first thing that's going to happen, you're going to have trouble with that mule. That mule or that horse is going to let you know something ain't right. And y'all, 95% of behavioral problems is caused by ill-fitted tack. The first thing you need to do when you start noticing a problem is check your tack. Right here at their withers, check right here. Make sure you ain't getting them sore from maybe too much tongue weight or ill-fitted collar. You know, and we're going to talk more about that once we go into harnessing. get the right size collar that fits her. Get that hand width right in here. If she's pulling real heavy drought, you might want just a wee bit more, or maybe a no choke collar. That'll allow for that neck swell. And if you get the right size collar, your draft line, your thickest point of your collar is going to fall right along in here, which is on the broadest part of her shoulder. That's the optimum place for that tug or that trace chain to come off and run down the side of her body, because what that's going to do, the optimum place, and it needs, you know, the collar setting like this, you want to make a 90-degree angle coming off of it with your tug or your trace chain. And what that's going to do is that's going to suck that collar evenly top to bottom. It's going to suck that collar back on its neck. It ain't going to dig in at the top, it ain't going to dig in at the bottom. It's going to suck back evenly if you get that draft line where it needs to be. And if you got the right size collar, too big of a collar, you're going to have a low draft line. It don't matter where you put your hames at or where you put your tugs at. If the collar's not right, your tugs are not going to be right, period. First step in this harnessing business and getting everything right is getting this collar right. If this collar ain't right, nothing else will be right, okay? So, to rehash, 24-inch framing squares, top to bottom. Take your tape measure. Measure inside to inside. That's crucial now. I went outside to inside, but that's because I got a little bitty tape measure and I don't have nobody to help me hold it. But I subtracted this from the total measurement. But remember, inside to inside, that's your collar measurement. That's just your collar measurement. And that don't allow for your hand. So you may have to add, you know, what do y'all think my hand is? 1/2 inch, 3/4? You may have to add that 3/4 of an inch to it to get that hand gap in there. Because this simulates from the top of her neck to the throat of how thick her neck is, top to bottom. So, once you got that right, then you know if you're going to add a pad, you got to add 1 inch. So if you've got a 22-inch neck and you want to run a pad, which I highly advise you to, if you run a pad, you need to go up 1 more inch on your collar size. Now, after you've figured out what collar size you need, your hames needs to be 2 sizes bigger. So if you've got a 23-inch collar with a pad on this mule, then you want to set a 25-inch hames. That's going to give you plenty of adjustment to go from the top to the bottom. And we'll talk a little bit more about hames in the next segment of the video on harnessing.